Hello and welcome back to the Radio 6 podcast. I'm Chambourine. I'm joined by GoluMolu yet again. And it's been a little while, Golu. We've had a few things cooking and we've been doing stuff. We've been away to LAN in London and we've got Invite in the middle of. And we thought we'd just jump on here and get a little recap of the last few weeks at least. Well, the last week at least. Before we move into the playoffs of Invite at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's had wanted to do maybe something in the build up to SI. We obviously got our predictions out ahead of time, or our reactions to the groups being announced a couple of weeks ago. So that worked out quite nicely timing wise with everything else that ended up picking up and keeping us busy. But hopefully back in the swing of things. Maybe nice. It should be good fun to chat about some of the SI.
Yeah, exactly. There's been a lot going on, and I'm sure that people that are tuning in have been watching a lot of the games. There's been a few bangers, there's been a few duds. That's just sometimes the way these tournaments work out. But overall, it's been a good event. Of course, we're running up onto playoffs as of recording. It's the 22nd of February, so it's the off day before the playoff weekend, and then we'll have 3 days of Siege and as well reveal as well. So, which we'll talk about a bit more at the end of this. But yeah, that's what we've been kind of up to. We've been kind of round about the place a few times, but we're just gonna have a very quick recap and a very quick discussion on what's actually been happening, some of the games, some of the teams that have perhaps had a bit of a strange event, some of them have had good events, and there's a lot to kind of get into. But we're gonna start with a very straightforward thing. We're gonna have a look at the groups. We'll have a very quick we'll go over the groups again, how they finished, how things have kind of fed into. So of course we've got through the groups completely. We're already halfway through the main playoff bracket, and then we're into the stage games just tomorrow. So that's where we kind of are just now. I'm just going to give you a little recap as to how things kind of transpired, because we've got a very interesting top six just now, I think. But yeah, groups to start us off is what we'll do. So Group A, which we know contained Dark Zero, Ninjas in Pajamas, Fear-X, Geeky, and G2 and Golo. There was a few surprises in there, and there's a few not so much surprises, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think do we want to quickly go over how the groups are formatted, or are we just gonna jump like?
I think we'll go. I guess we'll go with format first. Yeah,
sure.
We'll do that.
So the way the groups work, there was 4 groups, 5 teams, 20 teams at SI this year. Unlike the 24 of years past, the top team went into like the second round of the upper bracket. Second and third went into the upper bracket. Fourth went straight to the lowest bracket, so you're already losing your lifeline. And then fifth place got kicked out of groups. So effectively, as long as you don't come last in your group, you get through to the playoffs. It is basically how it worked. But obviously, third and above is where you really wanted to be, so that you get that extra lifeline by being in the upper bracket of the double elimination run for playoffs. That's the format.
Yeah, pretty simple, pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand. It's brought a little bit of I think probably the best way to describe it is it's not been as competitive in groups, I think, because of the way that's going to stand. I think that's where we were kind of touching on it briefly before we started. We kind of felt that the games, they weren't quite as the kind of standard as what we were kind of expecting. Of course, everything's best of threes as well, by the way. So if you weren't aware of that, or if you haven't been watching any of the games, they're all best of threes. So there were some games that were quick 2-0s. There was a lot of 2-0s, actually. I think some of the predictions I put out was like, I think this team's going to be pretty decent and maybe get a map off them. This will be a close game, but no, the amount of 2-0s was crazy, especially on that second day. And I think that is just as a result of you pretty much only really need to win one game and you pretty much get through. After that, it is what it is. As long as you don't lose all your games, you're usually fine. Which generally has formulated in the form of like Fear-X, they only won one game, and they got through. So, yeah. So that first group, the only surprise really for the first group, I think, unless you want to add in more to the format discussion. Before.
No, that's all I had on the format. Yeah. The only thing I'd say, I'll add a comment. There was 10 games played per group, as in with all the teams playing each other. Each team, the teams all played each other within their group in a best of 3, and it was a 1-round robin. So each team played every other team in a best of 3 once, and you got points based on your win record. If you won 2-0, you got 4 points. If you won 2-1, you got 3. If you lost 1-2, you'd get 1 point still, and obviously if you got 2-0, you'd get nothing, because you don't deserve anything at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I think the format I think it's fine on paper. I think the way it transpired was that generally it wasn't as competitive, and the reason it then ended up becoming very defender-sided, I think.
I think We can move into the defender-sided topic, I guess, in a bit. But I think the issue with the groups is, like you mentioned, there's a lot of top heaviness to these groups in that you have a lot of teams, and you're coming into international events. Obviously, you're looking at APAC being a weaker region across the board. You're looking at MENA having some good displays recently, but still being a weaker region across the board. And every group either had an APAC team, a MENA team, or both. And I mean, you could see this in predictions coming out from people both on Twitter or just generally in other media spaces. There was a lot of expectations and a lot of predictability in how these groups were going to be sort of displayed in terms of what teams were going home. The biggest contention was in Group C, mainly because of the lack of that.
Yeah.
With Bleed being the only APAC team there and the rest all being from the major regions. That's an unofficial term, but what we'll call for the simplicity of conversation, major regions being North America, Europe, and Brazil. And I think that's led to some of the groups feeling a little bit undersatisfying or dissatisfying. But generally, it was entertaining enough. I think the games were still good. I think it's been fine. I think I personally would have liked to see only 3 teams from each group go through, just so that we had a little bit more of a culling in the earlier stages to add just a little bit more value to reaching playoffs, because we have a very large playoffs bracket, which we'll get to in a bit. But it's very large, and I think having less teams make that playoffs bracket adds a little bit more prestige to be able to say you made playoffs at SI.
Yeah, exactly. I think I probably agree with that in some sense. I think then again, we have changed the amount of teams, and we've changed some format, and so there's always going to be something that's going to be slightly different and some sort of different results. I think overall it was fine. The first day was really, really good, really entertaining, and I think it was because right out the gates people were like, right, we need to get this win under wraps, because we know if we get this win under wraps, then we can kind of
can't be eliminated.
Yeah, exactly. That was basically what I'm. And then on the second day, this is what I'm saying with the 2-0s. Like, of course, spoiler alert. There's going to be a lot of spoilers in this synopsis, funnily enough. So if you haven't seen the games, we won't go into the individual, the round by round basis, but there will be kind of different fixture stated and stuff. So if you want to avoid that, then probably not listen. But that's what we ended up. Like the day 2 was just 2-0, 2-0, 2-0. I think it was like 2 games or 2-1. It was the last 2 games of the day.
There were 40 games played in group stages, 10 per group, 4 groups. 14 out of 40 games went to map 3.
That's insane.
So that is 26 2-0s out of 40 games.
Yeah.
Of the 14 2-1s, 7 of them were in group C.
Yeah. So
Group C alone made up half of the third maps of the 2-1s.
Yeah, and that makes sense because on paper it's the most competitive. So we'll get to that. We'll get to the individual groups in a sec, but to kind of circle back around and kind of chalk off the format. I guess we'll discuss Group A, which on paper was again, I think, a very simple one for people's predictions. It's got the current world champions in it. It had G2 in it, and I think just everybody put their weight behind predicting them to top it. Some people threw out the Dark Zero. Some people threw it.
I was part of that. I was part of the throughout the Dark Zero group. I think it was interesting. I think either of them are the right call. I think G2 were obviously coming in. They ended up being the top of the group.
Yeah.
They ended up on top, and I think that makes a lot of sense. They looked really, really good out the gate. They 2-0'd NIP. They 2-0'd everyone, actually, I think. I think all their games were 2-0s. They didn't drop a map. They didn't drop a map in groups.
Yeah.
Again, which is keeping that SI trend running. And they came out really strong. Dark Zero, I had a lot of hope coming in for them, and I think they've shown what they've been cooking up over the off season with their roster changes. The notable changes, obviously, they dropped Rice and they dropped Gaveni coming out of Atlanta, and they picked up Nafe and Bolo. One of those players you wouldn't have heard of unless you're a big fan of Rainbow Six Siege. So Bolo is this small content creator. And obviously Nafe is the UK superstar.
Yeah.
But it's been a really good roster. I've really enjoyed watching Dark Zero play. And I think they've been one of the most fun teams to watch across every game they've played. I can't think of a DZ game that's been unentertaining.
Yeah, they're always good. They're always a good watch. They have been. They have been no matter what the roster's always been on. It's always just been the staple of it, especially having Canadian in there as well. Always brings the entertainment value. There's a fixture I'll talk about later on that was probably one of the most entertaining ones I've watched in a while because of Canadian being on the team. But yeah, I think for that group it was pretty cut and dry. The only other conversation was really who was going to go home. It was between a lot of people were saying Fearex, a lot of people were saying GK were going to do it. I was a personal Fearex enjoyer. I was like, you know what, I'm feeling APAC this time. I feel like the GK, some of the decisions they'd made in the run up to the event just weren't instilling confidence in me, and I was kind of thinking, yeah, I think they'll be on the group, and that's what happened. They ended up being the ones that were to go because Fearex looked pretty decent actually. They didn't look at they looked a bit better than what we were kind of expecting, especially given that there was lots of kind of discussions as to whether they should have been there in the first place.
So Fearex obviously picked up Rin, which was an interesting move at the time. Obviously, Rin having, most of their sort of good performances coming from that D+ roster back in 2021, 2022.
Yeah,
they had a bit of a fall off obviously in 2023. D+ still not looking fantastic.
No.
And that's another trend that's continued this event. But Rin had a really good performance. I think Rin looked very good, not great in every game.
Yeah,
but they had their stand-up moments where you were like, okay, you know what, like fair play, like putting a bit of respect back on the name for Rin.
Yeah.
Fearex came in with a lot more preparation, they looked a lot more cohesive as a team than they have in the past, which I think has always been the biggest criticism of Sandbox that they weren't mechanically good enough to just challenge you, and they weren't cohesive enough that they could outplay you. And I think we've started to see in both aspects that team pick up a little bit more lethality.
Yeah.
Which has been great to see. And again, just adding to a little bit more of a deepening for the APAC region. Having, there's always the APAC worries. Are they just a flash in the pan sort of thing? I think we can start to see the Fearex core build up a little bit of consistency now.
Yeah.
The other thing that was really cool was that they did manage to get a big boot camp in
Brazil.
with Loss in Brazil. Thanks. I forgot the country then. With Loss in Brazil, they managed to do that little partnership, which I speculated at. There was hints of it on Twitter, and I'm really pleased for that. And I think it's paid off, having a much better practice environment to be around in. And I think having shown to be successful here, I think you have to say it's shown to be successful. I hope that's a thing we start to see a little bit more with APAC teams, is being able to get support from the org to go elsewhere for that improved practice quality. And I think that'd be a nice little thing to keep going into the future. GK, on the other hand, I was not massively excited for.
Yeah, I think I agree with you.
I know they just came top 8 in Atlanta, and that was always the thing that was thrown around. But everyone seemed to forget what the conversation around GK was in Atlanta. The conversation around GK was, oh no, we can't have Seriously. We've pulled in the leader as a last-minute substitution, and he's rebuilt the team around him. He's become our voice. He's become our IGL, our leading member. And this team now functions around him. He points and we kill, and it worked really, really well in Atlanta to catch people off. And then they didn't keep leader after the event. Leader ended up as a substitute on Falcons.
Yep.
And the team just didn't look the same otherwise. A lot of their games basically came down to, does Hasham get a 2, 3, 4K to clutch up around? Does Noodle have a big moment to clutch up around? If not, they're probably losing.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, there's not really much more to add to that, I think.
It was I kind of seen that coming into it. I think that's why I chose kind of the Fearex to come up. I kind of was thinking that I was like, oh, Fearex have got a bit more roster. They brought in a Brazilian coach as well, I'm sure.
They did. Yeah,
the name escapes me.
This is Fearex, right?
Yeah, Fearex.
Fearex did.
They
Dark.
There you go. So I was kind of had that in mind. I was like, okay, these guys, I think they'll be a bit more contending. Whereas obviously GK, they've made a few kind of, I guess, questionable changes, just like Falcon did as well. I think both MENA teams were kind of guilty of that in the end. And I think that they'll look at that and they'll look at their successes and hopefully they can kind of see where they kind of went wrong stuff and kind of learn and grow from there. But yeah, that group pretty cut and dry. NIP, they get through. They were not great. Let's be honest. They were. they were sometimes there, sometimes not there, but I think they just get through just by the fact that they have good pedigree, really. And that was just that, really. There wasn't any great matches, really. Were fine. They were fine. That's probably the best way to do it. Well, moving on to Group B, though, which was, I think, a bit more of a surprisingly entertaining group, I think. I think it was... There's a few games in there that were really good. Like we say, a lot of them were 2-0s, just like most of the other groups, but there were some decent games in there, some good attempts and stuff. In that group, Space Station, FaZe, Wolves, Team Bliss, and D+. And again, it looks pretty cut and dry on paper coming into the event, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously had FaZe Clan as the top.
Yep.
I couldn't not put FaZe Clan at the top after all my opinions coming out of Atlanta about Space Station. I couldn't put them down. They did beat FaZe Clan, so fair play to them. Again, I think you're looking at the bottom. It was between Bliss and D+, and I can't back D+. This team, they lost every game they played 2-0, so that's obviously not a great start. They haven't looked the same since 2021. They had a really, really good Sweden major, and nothing really since then. And we keep sort of having this idea that they're going to be good, but the roster just... I think the biggest thing holding back a lot of the APAC regions, this goes for Japan, this goes for Korea, Southeast Asia seems to have broken this now. But for Japan and Korea, they have enough talent to make one good team. Probably. And then like a fine team, right? The problem is they're split over like 2-3 rosters. And obviously, these different organizations are competing within their own region. They have no reason to bring like the Korean super team to Invitational. And I'm not saying a Korean super team would win Invite, but I'm saying they'd have a better shot at making it out of groups. But it takes one org to basically be willing to splash a little bit of cash and actually build that team, and find a way to navigate all the contracts and stuff in the off season.
Yeah.
And I think that's currently a bit of the issue, because we're seeing some movements around. Like, you know, they've made some changes D+, but none of them quite fit right.
Yeah. It's they were very underwhelming stuff, I think, from them as a whole. However, to kind of shift focus, I guess, from one APAC team to another, Team Bliss. I quite like them. Quite enjoyed them a little bit. And obviously we'll get onto them a bit more later on and discuss the playoffs. But in their groups, they obviously get through. I mean, courtesy of D+ and just not being good at all. They lost all their games, so Team Bliss get through because of that. And they're entertaining to watch. I think I really enjoy them being there. It's always nice to see them.
Yeah.
I also like their logos. They've got the prettiest little logo. I like it.
It's really nice. It's really nice.
I'm
the
a
little
Bliss
lotus.
Yeah, the little lotus. It's a very nice one. But the rest of that group was spicy. Let's just say that I think that's the best way to describe it. Space Station, FaZe, Wolves. Most people with sense came into the event were like, yeah, FaZe top this group, like, surely. FaZe had been favourites for a couple of events last year, obviously before the kind of prominence of W7M and stuff. So I think going into Atlanta, I think most people are saying, yeah, this FaZe are looking real good here. And they unfortunately have been kind of edged out by the other presenting teams, but these things happen. So yeah, it was a sensible thing to say they were top it, but they didn't top it. They didn't. It was Space Station, which is which I think is good. From aspect of Space Station are entertaining to watch. Now they are
really entertaining.
They are really entertaining to watch because, well, they scream, they shout. It's Ashen, always constantly in the comms, just screaming over people with the most obscene stuff. It's always really funny. It's really enjoyable. I'm a big NA hater for obvious reasons. It's EU. I will keep this old tradition going till the day I die. So I'm always rooting against SSG stuff anyway. It's always really fun when it's always really fun when I see them losing. But I think that's the most entertaining aspect for me is when they go quiet. But it makes for a really good game. And Wolves did beat them actually in the group stage, and it was kind of interesting that you kind of had a bit of a yo-yo in between the place. Wolves were playing really well, FaZe were playing decent, and sometimes they're playing a bit meh. But then they got 2-0'd by SSG, and people were kind of bringing them into question, like, what's going on here? This group is a bit chaotic, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, all of them basically beat each other, right? So Space Station beat FaZe, FaZe beat Wolves, Wolves beat Space Station.
Yeah.
And it basically came down to tiebreakers, and both FaZe and Wolves had games go to 3 maps, whereas SSG, all their wins 2-0s, they went out on points, and then it came down to round difference. I think
it's head-to-head first.
So I think it was the head-to-head that won, that put FaZe Clan above, right? Because they had the same round difference, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, they came in really, really strong. I don't know if it's head-to-head or if they won more rounds.
It's head-to-head. I knew that the head-to-head is the first tiebreaker, then it's rounds, and FaZe did beat Wolves 2-0. So that's the reason that they get the higher spot.
2/3. I actually think coming into this group, it wasn't wrong to put any of those 3 teams at top of the group.
Yeah.
And now this is coming from someone who, at Atlanta in the quarterfinals, I was adamant it was actively wrong to predict Space Station to win that series.
Yeah.
I was adamant that was a fraudulent pick to pick Space Station, and I have let that be known. I think coming into this, it was fine. Part of that is due to how long the off-season is. I think having effectively 3 months between Atlanta and the start of Invite is interesting. I would have liked it to be a little bit shorter, but I obviously understand with like December being a big holiday period, and then February is when SI is, because it's the anniversary of the game. That's not something we can move. It's like one of these awkward timings where it's like, if Siege had come out in like March, we'd be sorted, because you could do a major at the end of January, have a little like mini off window, and then start again in March, and it'd be great. But I think it all works out fine, and this group's been really entertaining. I think all 3 of these teams came out looking very good. They had good reads on how to play defensively, and all 3 of them picked up on how to play attacks as the event went on. I think Space Station sort of at the forefront of that for their group, which is why I think they ultimately came out on top of it, is because they did look like the more convincing team by the end of group stages when it came to how they want to play attacks. I think their roster's really strong. I love the dynamic they get with Blitz, with Forrest being a very good Blitz player. Forrest Blitz has not been as good at SI as it was in Atlanta. His Blitz was revolutionary in Atlanta. I think part of this is because teams are now ready for it. And we've seen across the board, so many more teams are picking up Blitz. Joystick is playing Blitz now. That's all you really need to know about the sort of Blitz revolution that we're seeing at the moment, which is, as a Shield enjoyer, very nice to see lots of Shield gameplay, both Blitz and Monty at SI. But I think that's been a big part of it, is how diverse this Space Station roster has proven themselves to be. Really strong roster.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of see where some of these teams go in the future and stuff. But to kind of wrap up that group, just to be clear, in the final kind of standings, it was indeed Space Station top, FaZe Clan second, Wolves in third, Bliss fourth, and it was D+ that went home from that one. And then the more exciting group, I guess, for the way the actual games played out, and I think on paper everybody knew that this was going to be a closer group just because of the way it was set up. Again, only the one APAC team, and it seemed like it was going to be like that kind of scenario, which is Group C, which contained W7M, Liquid, Bleed, M80, and Virtus Pro as well. Now, again, I think that it was coming into the event, I think that most sensible people would have said W7M topped this group, I think. Yeah. And I think that, again, more sensible people would have said, Bleed probably go home, just because of the pedigree, the APAC, the discussion between major and minor regions. I personally put Bleed at the bottom, not because I think Bleed are
outrageous,
are a poor team.
Outrageous.
I genuinely, right, in my mind, I think
non-believer.
Right. What I'll say right now is the only reason I didn't put Bleed at the bottom is because I could not foresee a scenario in which that roster on M80 bombs out of another tournament 3 times in a row in a year. I just couldn't. I was like, probability. I was like, surely in a format where you just need to win one game, surely they win one. Surely they can edge Bleed. They can edge an aging Liquid, like something. But no, nothing. Outrageous. So M80 were the ones that went home. I'm not shocked at it. I'm not surprised at it. It's just more. I'm more shocked that like a roster can go that long with such big names, iconic, Spoit, Lux Diaz, like Gomez, all these players, and they just just nothing, get nothing from them. So I imagine that they bomb out of Group C. They will more than likely probably be reworking that. I imagine. Some point.
I'd hope so.
I think there will be changes.
I think there are a couple rosters that need to change from this group specifically. I think both Liquid and M80.
Yeah, I think so as well. I would probably agree with that.
M80, like look, you've clearly been you just love your M80 razor cake. Every time it's like, oh, but like, and there's so many people who had this, right? It's like, oh, but you know what? They didn't do good in Copenhagen, but surely, they looked good in NAL. Oh, guys, they came second NAL. Like, surely they must be good now. Atlanta, they flop. Oh, okay, but they've had a 3-month off season. Surely, in 3 months, they figured something out. Oh, look, they replaced Kino. Kino died on Monty in the clip on the staircase. Clearly, Kino was the problem. Okay, well, they flop out of groups again. Look, at this point, this is what I've said. You can't back M80 until they prove that they deserve your support.
Yeah,
they literally have to do something they have to make it out of groups before I think this team can make it out of groups. I literally have to see it to believe it.
Yeah,
because first of all, I think Kino was a little bit scapegoated. I'm really pleased he went along to the event with the team, even if it was as the water boy.
Yeah.
Because he's obviously been sort of a part of M80 for a little while now. Obviously, was picked up when it was exit. They had a little bit of a trade back and forth. He was off. He was back on again. Now he's off again. I think Yoga played really well. Genuinely, I think Yoga had a good showing. I think Yoga's a very good player. And I'm also pleased to see Yoga's off of OXG jail because I hate to see anyone on OXG jail. But ultimately, this team just doesn't function as a unit, and I think you have to rebuild from the ground up. I'm a big proponent of you keep Spoit, you keep Iconic, you rebuild around them.
Mm-hmm.
I think both of those players are too good to give up on. Yeah, especially when you've already gone through the effort of importing Spoit. You've already dragged him away from Rogue and left Rogue just as a corpse on the ground. It'd be a bit rude to throw him away now and just have caught Rogue in the crossfire of this.
Yeah.
I think you have to double down on him a little bit.
Yeah, I think so as well. Again, there'll be questions asked after this high, and there's not a lot of time to answer them, by the way, because there's only a couple of weeks before Stage
March
1 starts.
Is the first EUL play day.
So yeah, there's not long to get roster, so trust right now that there will be roster mania happening. I don't know how you've done that, Golo, but your cam is now tilted to the side.
Is it just because I'm leaning? Or is it
No, you flipped your cam. It's now gone.
What? I've flipped it. Oh, do you know what it is? It's because it's died. Give me 2. I'll get it back. We can keep going. The cam's still.
That's fine. We can get.
We can keep going. Eventually, you'll get the face back.
Eventually, we'll get it back. But yeah, the group elsewhere though. To move on from the M80 subject. Bleed looking fun, looking good. Reaps putting in good performances. And Asfe, love that roster. Love that roster so much.
Asfe's great.
I have regrets in not predicting them, but I also don't at the same time because I have a long-standing relationship with cursing teams. Every time I predict them to win something, they lose. It's jokes. It's every single time. It can be the most cut and dry thing ever. Like, you can have the best team in the world versus the worst team in the world, and I would say, oh yeah, the best team in the world, and the worst team will win. So take it. That's fine. It happens, right? Rest of that group though, Virtus Pro were the surprising ones that topped it. I think that W7M people were just like, yeah, they're a shoe in. Let's be honest, they're they're the 2-time right now. Surely they just come in, they just roll most people. Maybe they have to put a bit of a fight up against Virtus Pro, but realistically, I think most people were backing them. They did actually end up on the same points, and it's actually the head-to-head was the reason that Virtus Pro went top, just because of again, head-to-head comes down to the individual games before it comes down to the round ones. And it was VP that won against W7M, which was one of the surprising ones. People were like, "Well, okay," especially given that Virtus Pro have been stuck in their ways for a long time, and they felt like that. They've just
really long time.
That they've just they've quite literally just been the Russian cyborgs of just we're just going to keep playing the way we want to play, the nice slow style, and they've changed things around, and they've looked really good in groups. and Team Liquid were the were the NIP of that group. They just kind of were fine. Some bad results, some decent results, but generally they were meh. Just what it was. They did surprisingly beat Virtus Pro, which was, I guess, surprisingly, given the way that shaked up. So that's why it ended up with a bit more of a closer group, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things with VP. I think VP for me were a little bit like MAT. Not as bad. Don't worry. Don't worry, VP fans. I would never compare the two in that sense. For me, the issue was that with VP, they always felt like they wanted to play their version of Siege, and they were quite content just eventually see if that works.
Yeah.
Right. There was no rush to innovate or to rebuild their formula, and it led to a lot of stagnancy. And you saw them have consistently good results against other European teams. We've got a backup camera for a second.
Oh,
there we go. Oh
nice.
God, that looks very different.
Oh, it's blurry now.
Yeah, it's incredibly blurry. We'll dim this for a bit. Eventually, we'll get the other one back up.
That looks alright.
Okay, well, we'll leave it then. I'll let the phone charge up. So I think with VP, they had very good success against European teams. They had very good success against teams that were willing to play slow into them, and that was what made them, in my eyes, a great gatekeeper team, especially within EUL. And it's why they consistently did very well, because EUL was going through a lot of teams with sort of inconsistent rosters. They didn't quite have their cohesion figured out. They were trying new things. Teams were replacing players and hadn't solidified on their own play style, which meant when you get in the server against VP, you play VP Siege. You play very slow. They're going to grind you out, and it comes down to the end of the round, and they win. And you look at the current meta that we're living in, and as very defender-sided, a lot of very slow pushes with a lot of utility that you have to deal with. And it really buffs up the way that VP want to be playing the game anyway. And so I think they get a natural benefit just because of the meta and how the game now wants to be played in a very similar way to how VP already wanted to play the game. And the defense is where they've excelled through SI. You look at the statistics, it's very much, we will win most of our defenses and make life very, very difficult for you, and then we'll chase that down on our attacking half. And as they've gone on, through the group stage, especially into playoffs as well, spoiler alert, they topped the group, they made it out, they have become so much better at adapting to how attacks need to be done these days, to picking up the Grim, to picking up the Capitao, to finding windows to use things like the Blitz, joystick picking up Blitz to spearhead. They've adapted it in an amazing way on attack, which is, as the event has gone on, has led to them actually being a dual threat team where they are incredibly strong on their defenses. You need to be you really need to take initiative to find openings against them in a way that other teams will give you windows, but VP is just very vigilant all the time. And now coming on to attacks, they can break you down very efficiently as well. And it reminds me of the old Empire style where it's like, we're going to peel this away, and then we're going to push you back a little bit further and a little bit further, and there's a cutoff being held, and you're dead, and we have an advantage, and we're going to push that very heavily. VP looked really, really good.
Yeah, they did. And again, I think they surprised people coming in the event. Surprised me. Was definitely surprised as well. I thought kind of middle of the group would get through. I think Virtus Pro, they always put a decent performance in, and like I think the best way you described it was a gatekeeping kind of team. They they're always there. They're always existing. But to top the group, I think they really kind of put a statement, especially one beating W7M as well, which was quite surprising. After losing on the first play day as well, which was kind of insane.
So I think because my expectation had been that they'd be third place. I thought it was going to be W7M, Liquid. I thought Liquid were just going to play just a little bit better, right? And then it would be VP, and then it would be Bleed, and then it'd be MAT last. Just because I just thought, you know what, coming into SI, Liquid always look a little bit good at the start of SI.
Yeah.
I felt it. But VP topping it, I'm really pleased to see.
Of course. Yeah.
And it's really cool to see the resurgence of, like, the OGs.
Yeah.
I mean, I say OGs, like, they're not OG, but, you know, like an old school Siege roster, like Core coming back in and looking really, really good. Really nice.
Yeah, it's really good, especially given that they were out of it for a bit as well. So that was, they're out of it, and then they've kind of just marched on since. But yeah, to kind of be again clear what the kind of final standings were, it was Virtus Pro, then W7M, Team Liquid, Bleed, and then M80 were the ones who fell in that group, and then moving on to the final group, Group D, which on paper, let's be honest, didn't look the most competitive at all. This is, I think, probably the most cut and dry one of all of them. I think you could have went, yep, they're going to be the ones at top it, yep, they're going to be the ones that are at the bottom of it. And I think that was just, again, because of the spread of the teams. With 2 APAC teams in there, 1 MENA team, we had Loss, which, despite their run in Atlanta, you could argue are one of the weaker Brazilian teams. And then Sonics as well, again, who've also changed rosters a couple of times and stuff. So they're just kind of feeling stuff. So it's a bit of a funky group. Sonics, though, really, I think they surprised me how well they played. I was like, wow, okay. 16 points, didn't drop a map, sure. It was just them and G2 that managed to get through the group doing that. And I was surprised. I wasn't surprised to see them top the group. I did choose Lost to top the group because I was like, oh, surely they can continue this nice momentum they built up in Atlanta.
I did as well.
I was like, surely they can continue that. But it didn't surprise me when Sonics did it. It did surprise me them to do it completely flawlessly and in the fashion that they did because they looked really, really good.
Yeah, they looked very strong. I think, for me, it was between Lost and Sonics. I picked Lost. I thought they'd be coming in pretty good. I think it's pretty funny. I think a lot of criticisms I have of people with the teams that they've made, or like when it came to decision making, was like, you're overvaluing Atlanta. It was so long ago. And then I'm like, oh yeah, Lost looked really good in Atlanta. Like, yeah, let's pick this team. And it's like, then just follow your own logic. Do you think they're going to be good after a 3-month break? And I mean, I still would have backed Lost, to be fair. But I think Lost came in not performing as good. They obviously stumbled. They lost to Fury 2-0, which is crazy.
Exactly.
And no disrespect to Fury. Like, Fury are a good team. I think SEA has proved itself to be probably the best region. From APAC, within APAC, which is, class that they're losing a spot next season at majors. They're going from 2 to 1 when you've got both Bleed and Fury who look very good. So one of those teams are basically going to be fighting to kick each other out of the majors, which is a bit of a shame. But it's just how these things end up. I think Sonics, again, have just looked really, really good. And Ambi's played really, really well, which is great to see because you always need to have players coming up from T2, from T3, and having good performances. It's so important to the game that we have the next generation of players coming up and performing well. And so to see someone like Ambi, who's obviously had really, really good run through NA T2, just come up and continuously look really good. There's a lot of talk and talking with people, to more the NA crowd. They were very excited for Ambi coming up, and you can understand why. Like, he's been running T2, and I mean, like, running T2. And to see that continue is great. And Sonics, again, as a core, looks so comfortable. They've really built up with their main 4, and then obviously bringing Ambi into that with Citizen, Geo, Rex, and Grixer all having been together for a really long time now. Yeah,
they're looking good. And I think that for me, NA's went through a bit of a lull for the last kind of couple of years, I think. And I think they're now, some of these rosters are starting to really flesh out and really start to kind of build up, and Sonics is one of them, I think. They're looking like a really, really good roster and really one to kind of keep your eye on for future events. The rest of the group, however, was lackluster, let's be honest. Lost, very surprising. A couple of surprising losses, funnily enough. And yes, some people will say that they had a miracle run with Atlanta because he did come through open quals to go to Atlanta. But again, you need to remember the core that they have. The team players, the players that they have, it's kind of expected for them to get through that. Yes, they did get through with like a couple of overtime wins and stuff like that. But
I think, the thing people also forget is that we are starting to see more depth get added to regions. I think for a long time, regions have lacked a lot of depth, and I think Brazil specifically has this weird bubble of Lost, Liquid, and Nib. And you're looking at events where it's like 4 Brazilian teams get to go to events. 3 get the qualifier, 1 comes from the open quals. And it's like, Well, there's 5 good teams that could make it. W7M, FaZe, Lost, Liquid, and NiP could all look in very much in the right in place at a major. You don't see any of those orgs and those teams and go, that's a bit suspect.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking again at just like one of them has to come through open quals. Lost beat Liquid in the open quals, and NiP, FaZe, and W7M obviously made Atlanta like naturally. So it's like I think we've seen this before. Like G2 came to Atlanta through quals, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so like coming to an event through quals in regions that are deep doesn't really mean anything. Exactly. And I think this is to tie back to what you're saying. NA is starting to have depth again. There was a long time where it was like there was a couple, obviously the same orgs really. It was still your Dark Zero, your Space Station, your Sonics, and it's like okay, and a little bit more, please. Let's just get a little bit more.
Exactly.
Because MAT has come up and been fine, but early MAT era when they were XSET, it was just those 3 teams, and there wasn't a whole lot of greatness coming from any of them at the same time. Like one NA team would do good at one event, and the next event they'd be bad, and a different NA team would step up.
Yeah,
it's good for the health of the game that we now have a bit more of a spread between them, and it's built off of bringing up young players. They're no longer fighting for the same veterans to like move between their roster 7 times a year. So it's just really good for them. I'm pleased to see NA doing well because like I know you're an NA hater, but like. I've been around too long where regions like I'm a little Siege globalist,
Yeah.
I love them all. I've watched all these players for too long. Like Canadian, like I'll always be a fan of whatever team Canadian's on. I'm a big Dark Zero fan. I'm a Space Station fan. Like that player and those 2 orgs, I always have to support. I always have to hope they do well, even if they're playing FaZe Clan. At which point I have to back FaZe Clan because I couldn't let that quarterfinals go. I couldn't let it go. So it's nice to see a little bit of depth come back, and I think we're starting to see that in Europe's getting a bit more depth now, which is really cool. Like BDS aren't at SI. I mean, we only have 3 EU teams at SI, but BDS aren't at SI. That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And there's, and M&M as well, who missed out as well at the time. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, to continue the conversation with that group, Fury were again decent, looked pretty good. Yep. Falcons and Scars really was the discussion to basically pick which one you think is going to go home. I picked Scars. They were the ones that headed home. They looked extremely lackluster. Falcons as well. Again, same issue, communication issues here in the place. They did actually manage to pick up a win. And
against Scars.
Against Scars, yes, and that's what.
It was the last play day. It was whichever team wins doesn't go home.
Yeah, that was basically how that's basically how most of the groups were decided for who went home, which is why we kind of touched on the kind of format at the start.
Do you want to give a quick shout out to Rec?
Yes,
Rec was nuts and is held back on Scars, and this is what I mean with like you have enough players in Japan to make a good roster. You take like. You've got like Arcully, who's just been let go from Cyclops, by the way. Cyclops have decided they want to win less games. So they've let Arcully go. That's a player you can pick up. You've got Rec. Like let's start to see someone put some of these pieces together and build like one really, really strong roster.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, like Siege isn't a massive game in big parts of Asia, right? Like it's not a massive game in Korea. It never will be a massive game in Korea. It's not a massive game in Japan, despite the fact that the Japanese community is really, really built up around Siege.
Yeah.
Like the Japan Invitational becomes a big thing and has been for the last 2-3 years. 2 years, I think they've run it now. So I want to see a Japanese team start to do well again, right? Like, let's not have Kag turn up and do poorly. Let's have a good Japanese team do bits.
Yeah, I think with the exception of Mina. At this event, I think that they've put a decent showing out. I think I've actually regressed a bit at this event.
I
think that there's clear.
It's hard changes. Not to.
Yeah, these things happen. And it's sometimes you just have a good event, and they'll start to formulate things. We need to give these things a chance, give them a little while. Again, still a real it's not. For speculation, they are a newer region compared to the rest of the rest of them, and inside the competitive circuit anyway. So these things take time, and I don't have any doubt that at some point we'll start to see them perform on the bigger stage as well. I mean, GK. Let's just hope the GK aren't the exception.
I want to say it was Happy who was making this joke. I want to make sure I give credit. I think it was Happy. But he was joking that Mina had basically speed run the APAC pipeline of turn up at an event, be kind of mid, start to have some good teams come up.
Yep.
Those teams then just completely flop and do nothing.
Yeah.
And I have a bad feeling it's going to get worse for Mina.
Yeah.
Off of some of the announced changes already and some of the speculated changes, Hasham's left Gike.
Yeah.
Their coach has left, and Noodle has left.
Yeah.
And I think those were, I mean, Noodle and Hasham were your two best players.
Yeah.
There was, yeah, I mean, I think GK need to figure out how they're going to sort of rebuild this roster up. There's an alternate timeline where they just keep leader and and they have a playoffs run. But I want to see, I don't want to see Mina hit that same sort of thing where they just fall off now. There's a lot of excitement built around the region. They've had some good, like, you know, GK had a really good Atlanta.
Yep.
Let's try and find a way to capitalize on that, to keep the relevancy, to keep it there. And there's an opportunity for Falcons now, right? Like if I'm Falcons and I'm seeing Hasham just left GK, like that'd be a really good pickup for you.
Yeah, exactly. To kind of move on from the groups conversation, we have the playoffs bracket as well, and kind of conversations about MENA and APAC and stuff like that. There was quite a few teams that got through. Pretty much everybody has representation. And the things, again, just because of the format of the groups, and one team went home, and so we have quite a spread of teams. Of course, double elimination bracket, for those of you that may not be aware or may not have been watching along, as is always the case with SI. Upper bracket, lower bracket, and you've already went over the kind of who ended up where for like top in the group and being at the bottom of the group stuff. But this is where the games are ramped up. This is where we moved away from because throughout groups it was very defender sided. It was it was a crazy defender sided.
70%.
It was like 70%,
yeah.
Which I think was just a symptom of people not really caring that much. I actually think that's what it is, and not really putting effort into their attacks because they were like, yeah, cool, we're through. We don't. That's that. And I hate to say that is the thing, but because suddenly people step into their playoffs and they're playing the same maps, and suddenly they're amazing at attacking. Suddenly they're doing this, and yes, I get that you kind of get a feel for it as the event goes on, and you do get that aspect of it, and you have the 3-month off season. But I think at the same time, it just felt a bit lackluster for some teams. Some teams kind of took their foot off the gas on some of them, but that's all speculation as to the way it works out. I know that you're a bit more of a statistics and facts and a bit more.
Well, I don't know. I don't know the statistic. I remember seeing the 70% statistic on a TikTok. I think a big part of attack being so strong was a little bit of sloppiness coming out from players and teams.
Defense, you mean, yeah.
The high win rate for defense.
Yeah.
And I think it also came down to an over-reliance on grenades in the past.
That
and
too.
teams being very slow to figure out what you do when there's no frag grenades. And as someone... So I started casting in July 2020.
Yeah.
So, yeah, too long ago. And it was peak, like, utility meta. Like, like Jaeger still had 2 ADS charges that you could then pick up and put down to reset the 2 charges. Like, Goyo had 3 shields, like, all this stuff. And the amount of times that I would just go, can teams please pick Capital? I've been begging since day for teams to pick Capital. Just pick Capital. It solves all your issues. Just pick Capital and don't be bad. And we are now in a Capital Grim attacking meta.
Yep.
And I am so here for it. I am loving the game right now, actually. And maybe that's a bit of a controversial take, because I know people are a little bit like, oh, defense is too strong. Like, obviously defense is too strong. Let's nerf a bit of defense. But let's not pretend Attack don't have tools that they can use. These tools just don't give you free kills.
Yeah.
So we talked a long time ago when the nade change was made about it. And I was more like, I don't know if this is good.
Yeah.
Like maybe in the long run, but right now, like, this is not what we need. And you were like I'd say the more like calm, like thought out view of like, okay, well, like, nades just getting kills is a bit dumb, right? Yeah. It's a bit BS, and you just get free kills as the attack, and then you move on. And it's like, okay, so let's find out how it goes. And obviously, at the moment with Azami, Fenrir, Tuberam exists, it's a pain. But in the long run, I think it's going to be very healthy for the game. Yeah. And we are just seeing the growing pains from that. And now you see how quickly teams are just like, okay, cool, we'll just run Grim, we'll run Ying whenever it's open. We pick things like Capitao, and we're no longer relying on just frag grenades to give us free kills. We now have to add a little bit of that coordination in. Okay, I can use my bees here. I can shoot in the Capitao firebolt to make sure they can't move up to contest us, or fire them out of their corner so they can't sit behind, their power position. They can't just sit still on rafters. We have to force this movement in a different way. And it's forcing movement that leads to gunfights. I think it is a better spectating experience because of it. There's definitely a little bit of confusion, because when you spectate and you see bees and fire everywhere, it's not quite Overwatch levels of what is on my screen right now. But I think we need to be a little bit careful with it. But in terms of actually getting to see action, rather than teams just going and throwing frag grenades for 2 minutes and then running to site, I think the game is in a really, really good spot. And we're already seeing teams like G2 flying up the gate look very good in attack. Yes. Dark Zero have adapted. Dark Zero have been my favorite team to watch at SI. I was watching their the Dark Zero VP game. I didn't get to watch it live because I was in a lecture.
No, spoiler! Whoa! We're jumping ahead. Hey, we're spoiling.
All right.
Hey, we're jumping ahead of the bracket. We've not even got into the bracket yet. Whoa! We need to stop you in your tracks before you get too excited. Right. That is the banger we were going to talk about, so don't worry about
that. Okay.
But to add on to your point, I think that I have a bit of whiplash from the groups, by the way, from the groups into the playoffs, because I think that the groups displayed some of the worst viewer siege I've ever seen. In the aspect of people were trying to solve the problem of the frag grenades. Like, that's obviously what it is. It's obviously that big change has happened.
Yep.
It's still fresh. People are used to it because you've taken the game from playing vertically a lot of the time for clearing out these keeper barricades. To people don't run I think I've seen one grenade kill the entire tournament. I think there's been a couple. I think there's been a couple, yeah, but I think physically with my own eyes, I think I've only observed, and I've watched like 30 hours of Siege. I've watched pretty much every game. So the whiplash from the groups though, where it was just spamming flashbangs, 12 flashbangs, because people were just trying to find ways to make things as one-sided as they could. They were like, okay, well, we're not sure how to clear this. We're not used to the Capitale. We're not used to this, and maybe it's a combination of it's probably a combination of the 3 months and the prep, and not really having any way to kind of figure out how things work, and you're having to really do it live on the biggest stage. You're having to go, well, wait a minute, we've done some scrims, we've done some things, but this is where it matters, and this is where we actually need to try and solve things. So you had that aspect of, right, okay, flashbangs, quick and easy way to fix this. Let's just spam the flashbangs and see what we can get. And it did make for some games that were just like, oof, this is difficult to watch. Thankfully, now we've gone into the playoffs, everyone's kind of felt it out a little bit. The meta's felt nice. Some of these games are absolute bangers. And that comes through in the score as well. Now, you said there was, 14 games or 2-1s throughout the groups? 9 already through the playoffs.
Yeah.
So 14 out of 40 were 2-1 just in the playoffs alone. There's been 9 already. And so that kind of speaks to kind of the volumes that the games are getting closer.
23 games.
Yeah, out of 23 games. That's generally how playoffs work. They do get closer as we go on, but I think that comes in with the fact of the teams have figured out the kind of meta and stuff a bit more as things have went on, comes back to what you said at the start about the Six Invitational. It sits at a weird point in the year for the, because it's technically the end of a competitive year, but also the start of a competitive year. It's a bit funky, and it kind of ties in, and obviously it's just to go with the start of the year stuff.
So Atlanta was the last T1 competition, right? And the nade rework hadn't come through yet.
Yep.
So this is the first time that teams are playing in official T1 games without frag grenades being what they used to be.
Exactly.
That's the growing pain. It's just, you can scrim all you want. You can play in, like, we've had, G2 have been playing in, I say G2, like, Wolves and VP as well have been playing in, like, the South Breach or the Malta. I mean, VP didn't play in Malta, but they played in South Breach, and you don't get the same gist of things. You don't pick things up as quickly.
Yeah.
I will say G2 coming in off the gate already having a pretty good idea. I do also want to quickly highlight on the flashbang, I fully stand by the flashbang tech. Like, I genuinely believe bring 12 flashbangs and throw them at defenders is not a meme. Like, this is not some sort of like silly, goofy, like, it's not that it just works. It's just a very legitimate strategy. It's like Wolves flashbangs got reworked a couple seasons ago, and we're now just starting to see people playing around with them. And it's because, why would you ever play around with flashbangs when frag grenades existed?
Exactly,
like,
you're free killed, so.
I have fully flipped on the frag grenade conversation. Like, fully. Like, I was like, this is horrible, this is disgusting, I don't want to see it. Like, this is gonna make Azami so busted, and I'm now like, I'm here for it. Like, we've actually saved Siege, by the way.
Yeah, the other aspect of like the defender side of thing that comes through is the presence of Tubarao obviously been really strong. And I actually think that Tubarao, now that he's been tidied up a little bit, is pretty balanced, but his impact, and Fresh touched on this really, really well in the desk segments, is actually, it's just his existence that's actually the thing, because now people, usually you'll ban Azami, you ban Solus, or you ban Fenrir, or Valk, usually. So usually out of those operators, you'll have at least 2 of them banned, usually.
Yep.
So you can kind of go, okay, cool, right, which one are we happy playing against, happy, whatever.
Yep.
And kind of work around that. The introduction of the Tubarao, though, it introduces a completely different thing to those operators, because it's guaranteed time lost, right? We've seen it on Clubhouse. There's literally a clip of it. I think it's Kangaroo Kenny has, I'll link his video below. So for
really
anyone,
good video,
really good video about the
I mean, it's kind of Kenny, of course it's going to be a banger.
Exactly. If you want to check that out, he will explain it. He explains better than we ever could.
The TLDR is, it was from the G2 Dark Zero game in the group stage, and it was basically just, you have 3 of these canisters that stall for 12 seconds. But if you have a bandit on the board, if the exothermic charge, because NGR is playing Thermite, if it's on the wall and you freeze it, you have to pull the charge off the wall, because otherwise the bandit trick will get it.
Yeah.
So you have to pull it off, then you have to wait for the ice to go, then you have to try and beat the bandit again, and if you beat the bandit, it gets frozen for another 12 seconds, and then you pull it off. So it's not actually 36 seconds, it's much longer than that, because it's all of the pulling it off, putting it back on, messing with the MPs involved in that process. Again, explained much, much better by Kangaroo Kenny, but that's the TLDR.
Yeah, exactly. And teams they don't want to lose that time. That's it. That's the antithesis of it. They just go, yep, he's going to take that much time to deal with, can't bother with it, let's ban him out. And that leaves open your Azamis, your Fenrirs, your Valks, these really big, these really high presence, really high win rate operators. And that's why we had the defender side meta, couple that with the nades. To get the most defender-sided start to a 6 Invitational in history. That's pretty much what happens. It's fine. We're going to chalk that off. We're going to move on to playoffs, and let's talk about some of these games, because some of them were bangers and some of them were very surprising. The first one I want to talk about is Wolves versus W7M in the upper bracket. Wolves beat W7M.
Yep.
Just, come on, man.
I mean, it was an amazing game. It was a really, really good game.
Yep.
I think Wolves just played really well. Wolves were just very, very fundamentally solid. They always looked really good. They had a very clear game plan. They took away Nomad a lot from W7M, which, you might not expect too much from, but it allowed them to get very aggressive when they needed to. And players who aren't Mowgli really stood up, which has always been an issue for Wolves, is that they've always had this, like, it's a very good on paper roster, but it's a lot of the time it's just one player turning up.
Yeah.
Wolves across the board looked very, very solid. I want to highlight Shinka.
Yep.
Shinka has been phenomenal this event.
Yep.
For Wolves. And so many clutch situations, so many times where it's like you just need to close out a round somehow, and Shinka's just been this rock for Wolves in very much the same way to Breed A for BDS. It feels very familiar to that. And it's great to see because Shinka's been around for a really long time now, floating around different rosters. Obviously, been on Wolves for a little while. This Wolves roster not really changed, and now like starting to see like the peak of Shinka's gameplay. I think has been really really good. As you know, we're both support support enthusiasts. So we always appreciate when someone is that solid foundation for a team. And Deadshot as well has been just outstanding.
Yep. Exactly. And also a little bit. So for that game as well, by the way, 2 when the maps into overtime. So there was a real possibility that W7M could have won that one out as well. They could have won that one, so could have went either way. Also to add on that a little bit of extra kind of enthusiasm to go and watch that game is that KZ on W7M broke the LAN kill record. As well. So that's to be specific, that's the LAN kill record. So for a best of 3, with 50 kills. Previously it was 49. It was held by Nesk, and he broke that. What a performance it was! It was unbelievable. The actual official best of 3 record is 55 from Citizen way back. Not on LAN. That one, no. So,
and then 56 outside of that with Dodes.
Yeah, 56
from the Rush event in Brazil during the off-season. But obviously that's not T1.
So Stormer of a performance. Kind of bizarre though that you can break records like that and not win the match, not win the game. It's crazy.
Absurd.
And W7N, they look good, but Wolves just edged it. They were just much better. And that put them down in a surprise lower bracket, which, to be fair, they didn't even look that mad about because G2, they won the event last year for the lower bracket. So that's why we love the double brackets. You get 2 extra lives. You get an extra live. It's always nice. But definitely a game to go back and watch if that's one of the ones that you're kind of revisiting. The next one, kind of the upper bracket, round 1 at least, was FaZe and Loss. The unfortunate casualty of that is that one of those Brazilian teams would drop down. Because obviously it's a Brazilian event, they want to get as many through them, but unfortunately, just the way the draw went. FaZe won that one out against Loss. Loss, they didn't look amazing. They won their own map pick, which was fine, but generally FaZe, they looked decent, they looked comfortable, it was fine. And they kind of sailed through the next one. The same goes for the next one to go over, I guess. Dark Zero Liquid. Liquid just did not turn up whatsoever. Dark Zero absolutely rolled them 7-1 on Night Haven for the second map.
That was ridiculous.
They looked completely lost, which is surprising. Again, on paper, you think, oh, Liquid, same roster, unchanged. Some of these really big heavy hitters, your Nesk, your Palu, and crazy.
The other thing to note with that is it was a 7-1. Dark Zero started on attack. This wasn't like claim our freebies on defense, and then we went like, oh, we just like 1-2 attacks. Like they went 5-1 on their attacks on labs. Like Dark Zero FaZe Clan from Atlanta was, in my opinion, like the map that I would say, like, if you just want to watch one map, like that map on their map on Night Haven Labs was great because both those teams are good lads teams. Dark Zero now, like, I think you just have to look at as like I mean, either Liquid played badly, but even so, like, great understanding of how they wanted to play the map. That was an insane game to watch, just in terms of just watching them break Liquid.
It was again bizarre that because Liquid hadn't made any changes, and this is why I was kind of like, okay, maybe they're cooking something. They've not made any changes. They've had a bit of poor stage 2, but really quite underwhelming for the event, at least so far for that. So for the kind of next upper bracket round 1s, you then had Ninjas in Pajamas and Fury, and I think Nip just again get through that because of pedigree, just because they've previous winners. It was both teams didn't look amazing, and they just kind of it's definitely not up in the upper echelon of Siege that I've watched. But it was surprisingly a bit closer. Fury won the first map, Nip won the next 2, but it was pretty cut and dry, the way it worked out. The lower brackets, though, is where things like to get a bit more exciting because, of course, teams are eliminated on the line, and that's how things go. So lower bracket round 1 games were pretty I guess they were surprisingly close. I think it's surprisingly not close for some of them.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty whatever, right? I mean, I think of all the playoff games, right? We talked about like how good some of these playoff games are. There are some teams that just didn't show up. Lost get kicked out by Bleed 2-0.
Yep.
Bleed looked good. In credit to Bleed.
Yeah, they looked really good.
So obviously, Bleed, Falcons, Bliss and FearX were waiting in the lower bracket.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to watch their opponents lose in the upper bracket and then play them the next day.
Yeah.
So they all had a day off, essentially, for the first day of playoffs. I mean, for most of them, it didn't matter, right? Like, Bleed won 2-0. Bliss won their game. They played against Fury.
Yeah.
I think there's an argument to be made that Bliss got maybe a little bit fortunate on some of the poolings, but I think you just see that, like, they actually played really well. I think the Bliss Fury game was again another little bit of a weirdly sloppy one. Fury are weird. Fury are good, but they also just seem to make people play worse when they play against them. And then teams come against, like, you play against Fury and you look a bit meh, and then you play your next game and you're like, oh, you're actually like a really good team. Why did you play so weirdly against Fury?
Yeah. That's probably the best way to describe it, actually.
Liquid slapped Falcons.
Yep. Again, that was the best Liquid have looked the whole event.
It was against Falcons.
Yeah, they got a 7-0 against Falcons. And W7M as well.
The logo.
Yep. Exactly. I messed that up, actually. One of my predictions I messed up. I can't remember which one it was. I put Liquid. I put Falcons to win a game on one of the days because I thought it was the Liquid logo. Like, fully genuinely. I said it before the game even happened. Falcons even ended up winning it anyway, so I looked really good. If I'd not said anything, it would look better. But yeah, because of the way the flow, it's quite funny. The other game in that kind of that lower bracket round one was W7M FearX, and FearX just unfortunate lands to the slaughter.
Casualty of war.
Yeah, unfortunately they draw against the existing, the 2-time major champions W7M, and I was probably quite surprised to be there in the first place. But they slapped them to pretty inconsequential.
That's where you insert the, like, I was expecting Kenobi meme. Like, just throw that in there. That's exactly how FearX felt. Yeah. It would have been interesting to see if it had worked differently. I'd be very interested to see what would happen if FearX played a loss, for example.
Yeah.
I really wanted to see that. And again, it's why double elimination is so great, because you get more of these sort of, like, what if games.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate they went straight into the lower bracket.
Yes.
Because you just lose to W7M and you're gone. And I mean, look, I am not advocating that FearX should have been in an upper bracket spot. I'm just saying that's what happens if you don't make it out, right? Like, you have the chance where a good team loses in their first round and you just get knocked out the tournament in unfair circumstances. I still think FearX and Falcons as well both probably lose their games. I mean, I think, it was W7 and Wolves. I think Wolves still beat FearX. And I think Dark Zero, had they lost to Liquid, still beat Falcons. So I think that's fine. But...
Yeah, I think there was no real surprises for that aspect. I think the Bleed loss one was probably the only one that people maybe looked at and went, that could have went either way, but loss looked not great at all.
Bleed looked decent.
And Bleed looked really good, so to their credit, he went through. Back up to the upper bracket though for the next one. Upper bracket quarterfinal. Sonics versus Wolves. I thought it was really surprising, the result with that one. It was a 2-0 to Sonics. And I know that Sonics were looking really good, but also so were Wolves. Wolves beat W7M. And were looking real good, and I was like, okay, this should be a good game, but no, Sonics, they essentially rolled over them, like, really easily as well.
Yeah. I don't want to discount Wolves, or, like, discredit Wolves, I should say, not discount. The W7M they beat weren't, like, W7M. Still W7M. Still a very good win, and it was still a really, really good game, and Wolves played really, really well. But I think there's something there, and W7M obviously beating them is great. They come into the Sonics game and just get clapped around. I think the Sonics team looked really, really good. I will say I only caught parts of this game. Again, it's just like sort of...
Yeah.
I mean, we'll talk about this with some of the formatting stuff at the end of our discussion of the playoffs, but I think it has been kind of hard to catch a lot of these games. Like, the next game, G2 FaZe, I also still have not seen this game. It's one that I need, like, I've been trying to go and rewatch. I just have not had the time. And it's a bit unfortunate because, I mean, I'm sure you'll elaborate, but I've heard this is like one of the best games.
It is, yeah.
Like, you told me it was one of the all-times.
Oh, yeah, it was an all-timer. Well, actually, no, I think I said it was I think I said the all-timer one was the Dark Zero one later on with VP, I think.
I think this was before the VP game had happened, though.
I can't remember specifically why But I think for two reasons. So obviously, to wrap up that one, Sonics, the two old Wolves go down to the lower bracket. Sonics march on to the upper bracket semi-finals. G2 Esports versus FaZe Clan was the next one. FaZe Clan 1-2-1. Most people would have backed G2 in that, and I think pretty much everybody did for that. They G2 win the first map, Cafe. They win it 8-7 overtime, banger of a game, and then FaZe just rolled over them in Border. It was strange, and then Nighthaven was a bit more back and forward, and it was really entertaining. The thing for me that made it such an enjoyable game was Lynx and Stokes, coupled with the game, because it was like the first game that I watched where I thought, right, here we go, two teams that are going to be fully swinging at each other, you know what I mean? Like, I felt like it was just two heavy hitters in the ring together, is what it felt like. Everything else is, you've been able to look at and go, could go either way. I mean, like the W7M one with Wolves, realistically on paper, you're thinking W7M, but the way that W7M had looked going into it, you're thinking, But this one, I was like, nah, both of these teams look good. FaZe have had a wobble here and there, but I still think that this is going to be a good game, and it was. It delivered. The combination of Stokes and Lynx on the cast, who have been stellar, I think, and I have to mention it just because I enjoyed it so much. I spoke about it after the game. I think that Lynx is to come in and beat his first SI. He's putting in a really great performance on the cast, and that's what made it really enjoyable. That aspect of it as well. So, definitely a game to go back and watch if you haven't watched it. For sure, one of the best ones I've seen in a bit. But I think all of these upper bracket quarterfinals were decent to watch. The next one, Space Station Dark Zero. That one, I don't know if you caught that one, but that was entertaining for different reasons.
Yeah, I caught bits of this one. Yeah.
That was entertaining for a bit different reasons, and that it was two NA teams having a crack at each other, which was very entertaining.
Yeah, I think again, right? I think the two that you're really looking at, I was a little bit torn seeing them get drawn against each other so early. But again, I think it was a really good game. I actually enjoyed Cafe. They made me enjoy Cafe. I'm a bit of a Cafe hater. This is the problem though, right? Is that I was like, wow, this is actually an entertaining Cafe game. Like some of the stuff the teams are going for here, like we're seeing like Space Station like actually being able to pull off like East takes and not just like repelling and dying and relying on just like random stuff occurring.
Yeah.
The problem is that it's like, okay, cool, maybe I do like Cafe now, and at the same time you're like, but this has also like ruined every other Cafe game I ever watch again, because now I know that Cafe can be fun and it still isn't.
There's been a lot of Cafe in this event.
There has been a lot of Cafe. A lot of it's been pretty meh.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a Cafe hater. But I think this was a really, really fun Cafe game. I missed the border, and then I caught the Bank. So the Bank was pretty entertaining as well. And obviously, I'm pleased that 0-1.
Yeah, it was a really entertaining game. Ashen, Canadian going at... Well, actually, if you watch it, it was more Ashen was screaming and shouting, and we know Canadian from we've watched them a million times on that stage, screaming, shouting, having a good time. We know what Canadian's like. However, for me, he was uncharacteristically quiet at times, and Ashen was just continuously going. And then obviously Dark Zero won it, and I will spoil it ever so slightly, so close your ears if you don't want to know what actually happened at the end of it. But it's led to, I think, one of the best interactions I've ever seen, which was basically just Canadian shouting in Ashen's face repeatedly after it, and it is such a funny clip. You have to go and see it when they won the game, and you could see it was so funny for Canadian, because you just knew that in that last map they were feeling themselves and they were going to close it out, and you could tell that he was going to be like, I'm going to shout at this guy. Like, he's been shouting this whole game, and I can't hear him nothing now. I'm gonna give him it, and it was so entertaining. Definitely a game to rewatch if you've not seen it. But yeah, such a good game, and this is where we really start to see the games become really good. With the exception of the Virtus Pro versus Nip game, which was a snooze fest.
Yeah, I mean,
they had a very close Cafe, which, by the way, insane. They had an overtime Cafe. And then VP just 7-0 them on the second map of Bank. Weird. The most insane thing ever. But Nip just not at the races whatsoever this event.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the games go like that sometimes, right? Where it's just it's just how it's going to be. You just have to go, okay, fair enough. Like we just got completely smacked, and you move on, and they get kicked out. It was, I mean, the VP map pick, right? So, does that mean anything? I'm gonna say yes.
Yeah.
But it's been inconsistent, obviously. But in theory, they're coming in on a very good map themselves, and they come in and they just clean house.
Yeah, exactly. Lower bracket for that one, lower bracket round 2. Obviously, Nip dropped down from that exact fixture, and they faced W7M. Again, pretty lackluster. W7M looked relatively comfy. On the first map anyway. Second map did go to overtime. And probably, to be honest, it probably shouldn't have went to overtime. The way it played out. Nip, it flatters Nip a lot more than it should do. But Ninjas in Pyjamas, they end up being the Brazilian team to go home. I think the first one, the first Brazilian team based on the schedule. Loss. I forget. That's a forgettable loss of being this event.
Yeah, honestly.
So Nip, they head home from that event, and from that one, obviously, 2 Brazilian teams against each other. Again, it's kind of fortunate actually, but it happens. That's the way these things work. Space Station versus Bleed, though. That was a good game.
Yeah, I feel like Bleed sort of suffered from the overhypedness, because realistically, this is one where I think SSG are just like coming in clear favorites, right? And you can't, like, the amount of sort of backing game, like, oh, Bleed have a real good chance here. It's like, Bleed are good. They're not that good.
Yeah.
I think we're getting excited because an APAC team doesn't fold the moment they play anyone that's good.
Yeah.
I really like Bleed. I've really loved watching Bleed play. I don't think it's good to like exaggerate how good these teams are. Like, let's just be realistic with it. For like, I get it. It's like sports. You're never gonna have like a well adjusted take. But they played well. They've been really good through the event. They've had some really good maps, some really big stand-up performances. SSG are just a level above, and they showed that.
Yeah. I think the thing that stung about it, right, was that Bleed led 6-3.
Yeah.
Again, spoilers, but kind of well surpassed that. That's the thing I think that stung about it, is that
on the Chalet.
On Chalet,
map 2.
Yeah,
they
so
lost 2-0.
So they lost 2-0. They were leading 6-3 and they lost 8-7. And I think that's the real sting, I think, because it's what could have been. Could we have got to Nighthaven and seen maybe Bleed get through? And I think that's what kind of was the kicker, I think, for that one. For me, it does make for really good watching. It was really entertaining, but you were just like,
a very entertaining game.
You were just kind of like, oh, come on, please get it done, get it across the line, but they just couldn't do it.
There was a weird one because they were 6-3 up, but they shouldn't have been. There was they were 6-3 up with 3 clutches. Right, like I think Turd won a 1v2 and a 1v3 in like back-to-back rounds, and then someone else also won a 1v2. Yeah. In the basement, and it's like SSG should have just like pulled up a drone, or like they had Lion a couple times, like sent out a Lion scan. There was the really good one was obviously Turd. Was it Turd? Reaps, sorry, got a 2K with the Karatos holding Dining by shooting them with the Karatos on Solarium staircase as they tried to walk down. Yeah, it was insane. And in a 1v2, nuts clip, really well played by Reaps. But
yeah, it was crazy.
We see SSG and Forrest on the line, and he runs towards bathroom. He goes to go out to bathroom window, clearly with this idea of like, okay, I'm going to go out to West Main window. And then he stops and doubles back, and they walk down the staircase together. And I think you just, in these situations, need to be a little bit tidier. And they go 6-3 down, and something snaps with them, and they just don't make a mistake.
Yeah.
They just no longer make these mistakes. They seem a lot more sort of focused in on the game ahead of them, and they just didn't give Bleed any breathing room and closed it out. And that was really good to see for SSG. I think that was really, really important to see, that they could have that composure from a point where it's like 6-3 down. And we've seen, Bliss had the same thing, where there were so many times where Bliss had map point and just couldn't end a map. As much as I love Bliss, they just couldn't end a map to save their life.
Yeah.
And the amount of pain they would have saved themselves this event if they could just win.
Yeah. It seems funny to say, but yeah. Yeah, so it was a great game to watch, despite it being the 2-0, probably one of the only 2-0s I'd say, yeah, go back and give it a watch, especially Chalet.
If you're an APAC enjoyer.
If you're an APAC enjoyer, definitely there as well. G2 Liquid, literally just going to skip right over it, other than G2 just slap Liquid right out of it, sees later. Yeah. Nesk, you're not getting your hammer, basically. EU supremacy, that's literally it. It was...
Whip it a bit upset on Twitter.
Yeah, it was quite literally... It was just one side in this. Because I want to talk about the next game, which... Astonished that it happened. Given...
Finally, by the way.
Yeah, like... I was in shock. Like I was like, "What? Surely this doesn't happen." Especially given what had been set up earlier on in the bracket. Wolves versus Bliss. Wolves, yes, they come down to the lower bracket, but they've beat W7M. They've put up great performances, and you're thinking, "Yep, okay, cool." It's versus Bliss, who had a decent group, but they get through and they have to play Fury. They get through that as well. Again, relatively straightforward. And then you play Wolves and you think, cool, right, David Goliath situation. And Bliss, they look so comfortable. Wolves just decided, we're not going to bother playing today. And it was the most bizarre game I've ever watched.
The important thing to set up with this, though, is the fact that it did start with a 7-2. Wolves 7-2'd Bliss on Clubhouse, map 1, which was Bliss's map pick.
Yeah.
So you're coming out there like, okay, we've just lost our own map, 7-2, to start a series against the track record between these two teams is crazy, by the way. Like, they have been in the group stage together, both here at SI and in Atlanta. Both times, Bliss have been, like, so close to being able to beat them. They did beat them in the best of 1 in Atlanta, but then lost later in group stage in the best of 3. And obviously, we saw Wolves make the Swiss bracket, where Bliss did not, because they beat them in the best of 3. They then beat them again, 2-0 in group stage here at SI, and now finally Bliss pull it off. But Oregon and Consulate just were so strong from Bliss. And then Oregon, obviously, we talk about a lot. It's so weird to try and, like, wrap your head around sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's like, sure, it's like, it's one of these maps where it's like, okay, it's so built on fundamentals. Everyone knows it really well. So it's like, okay, if you're just the better team, you should just win Oregon, right? If you're the better on paper team. But also, like, everyone knows Oregon. So, like, anyone can win Oregon. And it wasn't that case. Like, Bliss just looked genuinely really, really good. They had a lockout on defense. The Wolves couldn't find openings. Bliss was so good at like, responding to what Wolves were trying to probe for. And Wolves, who again have had so many players have really big step-up games, it sort of reverted back into the Mowgli show a little bit. Where so much of Clubhouse was Mowgli being so strong, so aggressive, so just in Bliss's face and getting these kills. And Bliss adapted to that so well, where they just went, okay, this is where the pressure's coming in. Let's just allow it to come in a little bit. We'll sort of eat this wave and just chill.
Yeah.
And incredible composure from Bliss.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what's quite funny? Like, I think if Wolves either win that or they go out to a W7M, they go out to a G2, I think they still keep their roster. But I think because they lost that one, and because Bliss made them look the way they did, I think there will be changes. And I think that they've kind of hinted at that as well, I think, because of that. Because they were looking good in this event. To put it bluntly, Bliss, they were looking decent. But again, it was like one of those ones where, surely Wolves should get through this. Also, there's a bit of copium. I'm having a bit of a fun. Loved Bliss, loved Bleed, just the same. And they did obviously what Bleed couldn't do with Space Station, and they toppled them, and again they just made them look silly. It's literally the best way to do it. It was so surprising. I think it's probably the most surprising game yet that I've been like, wow, okay. But it was a great performance from Bliss. They get through, and then they get themselves into the lower bracket round 3. Obviously, we'll go back up to the upper bracket just shortly, but to kind of finish off this part of the lower bracket, well, the next part of the lower bracket, which is round 3 years. W7M, obviously, having knocked Nip out, they move on to his face against Space Station, who's obviously not Bleed out. And this was a decent game, right? Decent. There was an overtime involved, another cafe overtime, which seems to be just I want to get some statistics at this event of how many cafe games go overtime. It's crazy. But listen, right? I'm an NA hater. I've said it multiple times, right? I'm not biased on the casts, of course, right? However, but I'm all about EU, right? And with that comes the age old fight against NA, and that's just what it is. I'm a fan of the classics, you know. So the Brazilian teams kind of are here nor there. I'm just a fan of their siege. That's just that. So when a Brazilian team comes up against that, I'm rooting for them. Not gonna lie. So to see Space Station getting all hopped up and getting so excited and getting into it to then just be felled immediately and humbled, I love it. It's enjoyable. JV92 finally arrived at the event as well. He's been kind of a wee bit all over the place, but he did have a stand-up performance.
Clubhouse was really good.
Herds as well has been a staple throughout the competition as usual. Faults though, what Faults to go. I'm not going to go spoil the individual rounds, but Faults on Cafe incredible. The Space Station win that map solely because of the way that Faults found gaps, played split theory, and did found stuff in probed areas and just played so well. But it was a great game.
Again, SSG on Cafe is just actually good.
Mm-hmm.
Like I actually like
very
very fun to watch them play, specifically on Cafe, and something about it. They have these attacks refined. They have alternatives set up for things. They're very good at playing off of these windows, especially looking at like your sort of east takes when attacking the top floor. Very good at playing off of them to get advantages and to push back against defense. Very good at not exposing themselves, doing anything just stupid, fighting against like Azamis in piano. Like they're not just doing like the dumb thing of like, oh, let's just like vault through breach and swing. Like no, they're like actually bring in like explosives. I know grenades are gone, but teams are not bringing explosives into Azami. And the amount of times I've been sat in a Discord call being like, guys, can we just like, Flores is available, Ash exists, so Zophia's still an operator. Like these picks exist. Bring frag grenades if you need to. Like, yeah. I mean, it's wild what some of the teams are doing just to try and like not have to do any work, but SSG willing to do the work, and I like to see it.
Yeah, they're decent, but unfortunately, they go home as a result of that. That is just the unfortunate way of things at this stage of the competition. The next though one fixture in lower bracket round of 3 was G2 versus Bliss. Bliss put up a decent showing, took a couple rounds of them, took the lead a couple of times. But ultimately, G2 were pretty solid. And they closed out both maps relatively comfortable, as we'd expected. Unfortunately, the Bliss Copium, only went so far. That was the final APAC team to head out of the competition, and that left us with essentially our last kind of top few teams. Kind of there because we've moved back up to the
left us top 6, yeah.
Well, because people play each other and stuff. Because the lower brackets at the time hadn't been obviously decided because there were some more upper brackets, which we'll get onto just now, which was Sonics versus FaZe Clan, for upper bracket semi-finals, and FaZe Clan they look relatively comfortable in Oregon first map. And then close map to kind of finish things off, but really should have closed it a bit sooner. It did actually flatter Sonics a bit more, I think. Most people were thinking Sonics going into that as well because of the way that Sonics had been playing. They were like, yeah, this is like, for sure. But FaZe Clan, they stay true to themselves and they put Sonics down into the lower bracket.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that game. Wednesday was a busy day, so I was on a bit of catch up. I caught G2 Bliss in the evening because I had to make sure I saw Bliss go home. Couldn't see them off without not being there. You know, like it'd be rude too. So I didn't catch this game. I've heard it was just a pretty solid showing from FaZe. I mean, the second game was an overtime, which is always a good showing from them.
Yeah.
And with the way that it works, so obviously whichever team lost this knew that they would still be playing on main stage tomorrow. As of recording, so obviously Friday, if you're seeing this in the morning before the game. or after the event, if you're doing a little bit of history work.
Mm.
So I think it's okay, right? You go into the lower bracket. Obviously, you know you need to win your next matchup, but you've made it comfortably through. And to go down to phases is not a shame. Like, there's nothing to be like displeased with. I guess you
Exactly.
could say. Obviously, you're gonna be annoyed you lost, but there's no shame in losing to FaZe Clan.
Yeah, exactly. There's no shame in it. Again, they've been the favourites for a couple of events in the past and stuff as well, and they've looked really good as well. But they make their way into the upper bracket final as a result of that. And the other game, though, which is absolutely an all-timer best of 3, and if you've ever watched Siege or you ever want to watch Siege, you should absolutely watch this game. It is 100% one of the most entertaining games I've ever watched. Xenox and Guz on the cast killed it as well. We also got a nice big sweary word from Xenox on the cast, which is always fun. The Aussies bringing in the bad language just to make it even more exciting. And trust me, when you see it, you won't even fault them. You'll understand exactly why. Dark Zero should have won that game. That's it. Yeah. Virtus Pro, they beat them 2-1. On Skyscraper, it went to full OT, 8-7. Dark Zero were in the lead. Bolo had an absolute stormer, by the way, on Skyscraper. He was insane. I think he hit 22 kills or something like that. It was nuts. But it was just a Bolo show for most of it. But they were on series point. They had the advantage. You could go see the clip. Always clutches up, and that from there, Virtus Pro quite let it go on and then kind of get the few rounds you need in overtime and finish it off. And that puts Virtus Pro through to face FaZe Clan in the upper bracket final. But that Dark Zero game, man, oh, what a game!
So good. I've been I spent all today like just rewatching this game. Whenever I got the chance, I was on campus all day, like going to like classes and seminars, and in between I was just like, cool. I got time to cram in like half a map in here. It's like cool. Pull up my laptop, watching through it, and like ridiculous. Just so many great moments throughout, and I think the big thing for me, this is sort of like referring to earlier, right? It's like Dark Zero coming in, really good understanding of how they want to play attack. And this is where VP finally had to show it against a team that can hold their own on defense. Because I'm not going to say VP have had an easy time at the playoffs, but like the only game they played in playoffs so far is that Ninjas in Pajamas game, because they jumped straight into the second round. They played Ninjas in Pajamas. Okay, it's not really a test, is it? Right? Like you beat them 2-0. It's important to show that you can beat NIP 2-0, but this was their test. And their attacks looked very good considering everything else. Bank especially. I was amazed with how efficiently they were moving through Bank, how quickly they adapted as well to things that would happen. They lost Teller's Archives to a Yokai drone. What do? They like and they lose Teller's Archives in a situation where like you look at how they're setting up, they look fully convinced they've won this round, and a Yokai drone steals it from them. Like it was a 4v3, 4 attackers alive, 3 defenders left, and you're planting with time off in dead time now. If it stops planting, you lose. The Yokai drone just slips through, blows them up, done. It's just round. And it's like things like this, they didn't let it hurt them. They bounce back, they replay the same round, like the same attack 2 rounds later. They adapt so well. They're ready for it this time, and they make sure that they clear deeper because of it. They just did everything correct, and I think it's how they set themselves up. It's the incorporation of the Grim coming through. It's this willingness to get aggressive on picks like Blitz on Skyscraper, where you're like, okay, we need something to break through Drum. Okay, let's pull out the Blitz. Joystick's 1v2 clutch on Blitz. Lovely. I'd say it was shutting down Nafe's 1v2 clutch on Skyscraper was brilliant, just getting aggressive. Really entertaining game. So back and forth as well. And this is what I mean when we're like we're starting to see attacks like it. We're not just seeing attacks just crumble. Like good teams will win attacking rounds with startling efficiency. Like you can win rounds.
Exactly. I think like I say, definitely go back and watch that one. If you only watch one game from this entire event, let it be that one. So far, at least. But that leads me kind of nicely to the next point. So top 6 has been decided for stage games for the weekend. That is upper bracket final FaZe Clan versus Virtus Pro, lower bracket quarterfinals Sonics W7M and then Dark Zero versus G2 Esports. Now, I think coming into the event, I would have put most of the teams in there that are there. I think, right? The only exceptions, I wouldn't have chose Sonics to go that far, and I maybe Virtus Pro were for me on Fraud Watch. A little bit. Yep. I was a wee bit like, do they? Maybe not. I think I was maybe taking either like maybe a Wolves, maybe a Liquid or something like that, getting to the stage games or something, or maybe Space Station.
Yeah, Space Station would have been
to get in there. But again, the way the brackets fall, the way these things work out, that's the way it is. But I think that for the actual event, I think we genuinely do have the best teams. I don't think there's anyone being hard done by the way the draws have worked out. I think that they are the best teams that have shown up at this event. Sonics have been great, FaZe have been great, Virtus Pro great. Everybody, it's been amazing. I don't think there's anyone that kind of doesn't deserve to be there, and I'm excited. I am excited for these stage games tomorrow, and I'm glad that we have 2 representatives from every major region. I guess it would have been nice to get some APAC there. It would have been nice to get APAC or MENA in there, but we have I guess the major regions, which is obviously EU, NA, and Brazil was the conversation. 2 from each one. FaZe W7M from Brazil, Dark Zero, and Sonics from NA, and then G2 and First Pro from EU. So it's pretty balanced. There's no one playing against each other from the regions. So that's insane.
Really nice.
No one plays against each other. It's great. It's fabulous. So no one's going to be knocking each other out. It's going to be everybody get to play inter-region. The only inter-region matchups we can get is either the only insider, I guess. What was it?
Well, you could have a couple, right?
You can only have it in the upper bracket, lower bracket.
Look, if Sonics and Dark Zero win their games, they play each other.
So well, yeah, there's that. So there's that. There's the anyone.
But basically, you can only get one because there's no way to get more than one of the same region because either. So the way it's working, FaZe and Virtus Pro are playing in the upper bracket final. So that means whichever one of those wins is in the grand final guaranteed. They just have to play one game to get there. The team that loses will go down to the lower bracket final. Then you've got Sonics versus W7M and Dark Zero versus G2. The winner of each of those games will play each other. And then the winner of that game will move on to play the loser of our upper bracket final, FaZe VP.
Exactly.
So, obviously, being in that upper bracket final, you are so much closer to the grand final. Whereas, if G2, for example, want to make it to the grand final, they have to beat Dark Zero, then win a second game, then win a third game to be in the grand final. And then to win the grand final, there'll be 4 more games they still have to win. FaZe found out 2 away. VP are 2 away from winning. So, obviously, a big advantage coming in from that upper bracket, especially because of the sort of scheduling, right?
Yeah.
These games are all being played on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I believe the upper bracket final is being played on the Saturday.
Yep.
So you have nothing to do on Friday. You play one game on Saturday. If you win, you then just play one game on Sunday.
Yeah.
Obviously, quite nice for you if you can come in from that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so this is obviously the age-old conversation. You used to go into a grand final with a full map advantage if you came from the upper bracket. Now you don't get that. Now it's just if there's no map advantage. You get a advantage in the ban phase and the advantage of having to play less games. Some people prefer to play more games. You get more under you. You get to do a bit more. Some people, well, they say that anyway. They're always like, yeah, we like to play more games and stuff like that. I mean, G2 are the biggest proponents of that. They're always on Twitter.
Of course.
I'm so bored having to have a day off. It's like G2 when they're all 3 games in Atlanta, and Alma was like, I've got 3 more days off. I don't want to have these days off. I want to play Siege. Like
running around in tracksuits. With his speaker.
Yeah, just causing havoc.
Just taunting teams who are like, they're all sat there at breakfast, like, oh, today could be the day. We could be eliminated today, and then you have Alibal just rocking around, just being like, I'm Slim Shady.
Yeah, exactly. It was it's so funny.
Absolute nutter.
But I mean, there's no doubt. It's better being in an upper bracket final. You win one game, you're in the grand final. You book your slot for at least a chance at the hammer. It's crazy. At the time of the groups coming out, I wouldn't have said it when I mean the upper bracket final would have been FaZe Clan versus Virtus Pro.
No,
it's like one of those teams is going to be in the final. Is just crazy. I think FaZe are a strong team. But Virtus Pro, I think, for me, I think they're a strong team. I've just never said, like, recent times thought, yeah, they're going to win a hammer. It just doesn't compute. But the good thing is that
yeah,
yeah, go for it.
especially 5 years later, right? Like
5 years later, yeah, exactly,
5 years
exactly.
later, and they're back.
They're back. They're back. We're here again. Exactly. It's wild. The good thing is in the lower bracket though is that we, depending on how things are, we might get that W7MG2 rematch. The unfortunate victims of that is just the whole of NA. So for that to happen, Sonics and Dark Zero have to crash out. Both of those games are going to be bangers. I think all 3 games are going to be bangers, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be a bad game. I don't think there's anyone where I'm thinking this person's going to definitely win. This is definitely going to happen, which is nice because sometimes you get that. Sometimes you just think, oof, right, like when W7M previous event, anytime they played against anyone, I was like, yeah, they're going to beat them. Like it's just like, yeah, like that. It just is what it is. Now I'm not so sure. So yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be a hell of a weekend. I'm not going to do predictions. You can feel free to do predictions. I'm not going to do them because I'm not cursing teams. I've had enough of it. I cursed bleed out of the competition. I'm sorry, people. I've cursed so many people out of the competition. I'm sick of it.
I'm doing it. Here's my take. I think we'll get the easy one out of the way. I think it's a 2-1 to W7M in the lower bracket.
Okay.
I think Sonics have been really good. I think W7M are ramping up, and Sonics are definitely capable of winning a map. Sonics are very strong, and they're not to be underestimated or slept on. If they win, I'm not going to come out and be like, "Oh my god, I didn't see that cut." Like,
yeah,
I think there's a good chance we see W7M kicked out this event, and it's a misery because I would like to see W7M secure the legacy. I'm on record as like, I think they have been all year long the best team, without a shadow of a doubt. Obviously, they won both majors. They've looked phenomenal, but they've just been far above the standard of Siege internationally, even from everyone else. So I would like to see them win the hammer, just to be able to say, like, look, this was just the W7M year. We can look back at this because you know what's going to happen if they lose. People are going to find a way to diminish the achievements already.
Yeah.
And I don't want us to be like, oh yeah, but like they only played like Lost in the final. Like Lost didn't even mean to be there. Lost didn't even Lost got like first rounded at SI. It's like, no, this is not the narrative.
Yeah, exactly.
Lost played phenomenally in Atlanta. They played terribly at SI. But W7M were just class. They were just a level or better. But I think they 2-1 Sonics. I think Dark Zero get beaten to. I'm gonna say 2-1 this time. I think Dark Zero have leveled up since their meeting in the group stages. I think G2 is still better.
Yeah,
that's my take.
Yeah.
FaZe VP is hard to call. This is a hard one to call. I think it's a 2-1 either way. I think it's a 2-1 banger either way.
Yeah.
It's so hard to say. I think FaZe win 2-1. I think FaZe have had the harder road.
Yeah.
I think they've looked really, really good. And I think having had a really a tough fought group stage into, they beat Lost and they had a bit of they had a good win against Lost, but obviously it was a 2-1. They had a really good game against G2, obviously getting that win. They come in, they put Sonics down. I just have a feeling. I want to see FaZe Clan in the final. I think you look at all the teams left. Obviously, the really big Brazilian organizations are FaZe Clan and Liquid. That's the big fan bases, and I want to see FaZe Clan coming in with that advantage. Like they've always been so close. They obviously won Sweden in 2021, but haven't won anything since. I want to see them be able to do it. I'd be very happy. I'd be so happy if VP do it.
Yeah.
But I think FaZe 2-1.
Yep.
And then I think it's going to be the G2 W7M rematch. I think G2 win it. Yeah. I think G2 beat W7M, make it through to the lower bracket where they would then have to play VP if obviously FaZe wins. And then I think we get a G2 FaZe final. That's my call. I think it's going to be a G2 FaZe final. Which would be sad for VP, obviously. Yeah. But I just, as a G2 fan, I need to see it. I'll be biased. I'll be biased. Yeah. I think it's a FaZe. I think it's FaZe G2 final, and I don't know. Let's say G2 take it. G2 pull off the full sweep. They beat the team that knocked them down.
Fair enough. I respect it. Like I say, I'm not going to go on record with my predictions because I was cursed teams. It's just not happening. However, you do have the solace of knowing that I have locked my predictions in on R6 Esports, so they are there. They are all. Nice. So I can't go, oh well, I voted for this team, I predicted this team, and then cop out of it. They're there. They're locked in. They're written black and white. So after the event, if I'm
share it.
I'm happy to share it and be like, look, I was completely right, or damn,
this is where you've got like 7 accounts with every possible combination. It's like those Twitter accounts that stay on private, and then they go like, they'll tweet out like, oh, it's like they're like, oh, watch out for March 22nd, 2024, something big will happen. But they do that for like every day of the year. And then they just like, when something big happens, delete all of the other ones, unprivate their account, and it looks like they tweeted it like 3 months ago. But people fall for that all the time. Like, just like, I don't know how, but yeah. I mean, if you were confused how they call events, that's how they do it. It's not rocket science.
There you go. You've learned something today. But yeah, we have our top 6 locked in. FaZe, Virtus Pro, Sonics, W7M, Dark Zero, and D2 Esports. They will all be competing for a shot at the hammer on Sunday's the final, but over the weekend they will be there. Yes. And we were kind of worried it was going to be announced before we started recording, but it has been. We can confirm that we will be involved with some watch parties over the weekend. I've been watch partying on my channel with a few different people, with you, with a Diana involved. We've had a few different ones. I think Joe actually snuck into one. I think he snuck into one as well at the start.
Joe replaced me.
Joe Pooble, I think he got in for just a little bit. He snuck in a little bit, but yeah, we've been watching them. We've been having a good time for them, and it felt right to have a big event. So tomorrow we'll be, well, I say tomorrow, but on the 23rd, we're going to be on the Rainbow Six NEU channel, watch partying the playoffs, and then I will be at Pixel Bar in Manchester for the watch party. You might be there. You were saying you may be.
I will not be now. I was trying to figure it out. I wanted to make it work. I couldn't quite pull it off.
Tough times.
But we are running one in Swansea. So
nice.
There is a Swansea watch party going on, which of course, I mean, it's through the esports sock. Turn up, why not? That'll be good fun. So that's at Fulton House on Swansea.
Yeah,
should be good fun.
Nice.
Yeah, not gonna be in Manchester. I tried to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
But alas, we could not.
It happens. It's all good. Anyway, it doesn't matter because we'll be in Manchester again anyway for the major, which has already been announced as well. So I get to go to Manchester twice. But yes, we are going to be involved in some watch parties over the weekend. Joined by the wonderful Grace and Corey as well. Will be with us alongside. Thanks to Ubisoft and Rainbow Six UK for getting us involved. And we're excited. It's going to be good. We get to watch some of these games live, get to react, get to have some fun. And we will see you there. Before we go though, there's one more thing we need to mention. And that is Saturday night, 5:30, I think, for the UK time. It's like 6:30 in EU, is the official announcement of Operation Deadly Omen.
Oh yeah, of course.
So remember, so you know the schedule of it, that it is not, the reveal isn't before the final on the Sunday. That's not the way that things are working. So just make sure you get your places right, get your times right. So you got some playoff games tomorrow, Friday the 23rd, a few of them. Then Saturday the 24th, you've got the upper bracket, that'll be presumably the upper bracket final, the lower bracket final. I think so. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know the scheduling, but anyway, there'll be some games on the Saturday, and there'll also be the Deadly Omen, the Operation Deadly Omen reveal on the Saturday night, and then on the Sunday we have the esports panel.
Yeah.
So the Blast Esports for the year. To kind of reveal everything, kind of that. The show match, and also the Six Invitational grand final.
Yes.
So that's your scheduling. For what's where, so just make sure because some people kind of thought they were on different days, and stuff. So just make sure you remember that the reveal's on the Saturday night, the esports panel's on the Sunday night, followed by the final, and will keep you right. But Operation Deadly Omen, I'm excited. I've seen there's a few teasers here and there. I've not really looked into much of it. I need to stay clear of it because I know that there's some stuff managing to come through, leak through a little bit. Close your eyes, close your ears until Saturday night, everybody. It's going to be fun. And one thing I'm very glad of is that the big man Jynxzi is going to be co-streaming the finals alongside Shroud as well, which I was very surprised at, given that obviously Shroud years ago was a big name in Siege, and he's not really been involved in the scene as much. So I was quite surprised to see him getting involved. And
he did do some like watch party stuff for some other events and things. Obviously, like I think he did like a lot of like games with Bolo at the time, like when Bolo was still on TSM, that sort of thing. Like it's he has had this like interest in Siege. It's cool to see him like sort of dabble his toe back in. Obviously, like encouraged to by Ubisoft, but that's still really cool to see.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad to see them embracing the co-streaming, embracing the watch party vibes, and I think that it's going to be one of the biggest events in Siege's history. I think it's going to be one of the biggest weekends for Siege ever.
It's going to be sick.
The viewership's going to be crazy. It's going to be a wild weekend. You've also got I don't actually know how to say his name, so I might butcher it. I think it's Gaules. I think is also streaming it. Is also co-streaming it. I believe a Brazilian creator. Who is also going to be the one getting involved as well. So that's the kind of three major creators that are co-streaming the event over the weekend, which is going to be crazy. Of course, we've got our own watch party for Rainbow Six UK. There's going to be stuff happening all over the place. I also have an inside scoop as to who's playing in the show match as well. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So it's going to be a banger as well. So it's going to be such a good weekend. I can't wait.
Spoiler alert! It's just Dark Zero. Dark Zero playing in the show match against 5 randoms from the crowd.
Listen, I know something. I know something.
Dark Zero make the grand final. They have to play 5 randoms. They beat the 5 randoms and then get clapped by FaZe in the final. The script's been leaked. Sorry, Ubisoft.
Sorry guys, we got the NC scoop. I mean, you exactly what's going to happen. Yeah. That's what it is. But yes, so if there's anyone that's tuning in, we'd appreciate if you drop by the watch parties over the weekend. Like I say, it'll be Rainbow Six NEU. I'll link it down below. And I'll see you physically in Manchester Pixel Bar for the watch party if anyone that's listening is going to be there. But I can't wait. I'm so excited. I'm shaking with excitement. Love Six Invitational. I've watched every single game so far. I'm ready to watch more.
Which is crazy considering it's all been split over 2 streams.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I still watch every game, but I've watched like
live all the time. Basically.
I've watched all the live games, and then if a map's finished, I've been like, right to the next one. But right over a B stream, been juggling streams, so there's some maps I've missed and stuff like that. But overall, we've seen pretty much most of the bangers. It's now onto the one stream now. Despite which is actually
eventually
before we leave, that was only one thing. That was my only tight feedback. The only thing I had an issue with was that the last kind of lower bracket games were split into 2 streams. There was 4 games every day. We've had 4 games. And it was just very strange that on the last day we had 2 streams for 4 games because we played 2 of them at the same time. In future, it'd be nice to have them all in one stream. Just have them one after each other.
Just so people can catch them all.
So we can catch them all. So we don't miss some of those games because all the other play days were long as well. But I understand maybe they want to rest people and stuff. Stuff like that. But hey ho, I'm excited. I'm ready to go and Golu. I think that's us wrapped up. Is there anything else you want to add on before we end this episode?
Nope.
Cool. Nice. Thank you very much for joining in to the Radio 6 podcast, and we'll see you over the weekend. Bye bye.